Atomic Habits by James Clear. You wake up every single morning with the best intentions. Today is going to be the day. Today, you are finally going to start exercising. Today, you are going to eat better, read more, stop wasting time on your phone. And then somehow, without even really noticing it happening, the day slips away and you end up doing the exact same things you did yesterday. Sound familiar? That cycle, that maddening loop of wanting to change but never quite managing to, is something almost every single person on this planet experiences. And here is the wild thing. It is not because you are lazy. It is not because you lack willpower. It is not because you are somehow broken or less capable than the people around you who seem to have it all figured out. The real reason is that nobody ever taught you how habits actually work. And that is exactly what we are going to fix today. This is a complete and detailed breakdown of Atomic Habits by James Clear, one of the most practically useful books ever written on the science and art of building a better life through small daily actions. By the time this video is done, you will understand not just what the book says, but how to actually apply every single concept to your real life, starting right now. Let us get into it. So the first thing James Clear wants you to understand is the foundational premise of the entire book. And it comes down to a deceptively simple idea. Small habits, done consistently over time, produce enormous results. Not big dramatic overhauls, not massive bursts of motivation, not those moments where you feel pumped up and ready to conquer the world. Just tiny, almost embarrassingly small improvements, repeated day after day. Clear actually gets mathematical about this. He asks you to imagine getting just 1% better at something every single day for a full year. Now, your first instinct might be that 1% is basically nothing. It barely registers. But when you compound that 1% daily improvement over 365 days, the math becomes astonishing. You end up not 1 year better, not 10 times better, but approximately 37 times better than where you started. 37 times. That number should stop you in your tracks, because it completely flips how most of us think about progress. We tend to think in terms of giant leaps. We want to lose 30 pounds in a month. We want to launch a business in a weekend. We want to become fluent in a language in a few weeks. And when those massive transformations do not materialize immediately, we conclude that we have failed and we quit. But what if that whole framework is wrong from the start? What if the tiny daily choices, the ones that feel too small to even matter, are actually the whole game? James Clear argues absolutely yes, and the science backs him up completely. Now here is where it gets really interesting. Clear talks about what he calls the valley of disappointment. Imagine you start a new habit on day 1. You are excited, motivated, ready to go. Day 2, still feeling good. Day 3, things are getting a little harder. By week 2, you have not seen any visible results yet. The scale has not moved. Your bank account looks the same. Your relationships feel unchanged. And this is the moment where most people quit. Because human beings expect linear progress. We expect that if we put in effort, we should see results proportional to that effort, and we should see them quickly. But habits do not work that way. Progress is not linear. It is exponential. For a long time, nothing seems to be happening. And then, suddenly, in what feels like an overnight shift, everything changes at once. But that sudden change was actually the result of all those invisible days where you kept going, even though it seemed like nothing was working. Clear calls this the plateau of latent potential, and understanding it might be the single most important mindset shift you take away from this entire video. Okay, so now that you understand why small habits matter so much, let us talk about something. Clear says that is genuinely controversial in the self-help world. He says you should forget about goals. Now, before you click away, let me explain what he actually means, because this is nuanced and critically important. He is not saying goals are useless. He is saying that your goals and your systems are two very different things, and most people are so focused on the goal that they completely neglect the system. And the system is everything. Think about it this way. Every runner in a marathon has the same goal of finishing the race. The goal does not differentiate the winners from those who struggle. What differentiates them is the daily training system each person has built. Two people can want the exact same outcome. Only the one with the better system gets there reliably. Clear also points out something subtle but powerful. Goals create a kind of all or nothing mentality. You either achieved the goal or you failed. Systems, on the other hand, are something you either practice or you do not, and every day you practice is a win. Systems also solve the problem of what happens after you reach your goal. If you trained for a marathon but had no running system beyond the goal, what do you do the morning after the race? Most people stop running entirely because the goal that was driving them is gone. But if you built a system, you just keep going because the system itself becomes the point. This brings us to what Clear considers the deepest layer of the whole framework. He says there are 3 layers to behavior change, and most people are operating at the wrong layer. The outermost layer is outcomes. These are your results, the things you want to achieve. The middle layer is processes. These are your habits and your systems. And the innermost layer is identity. This is your self-image, your beliefs about who you are. Most people try to change from the outside in. They focus on what they want to achieve. They put the outcome first. But Clear argues the most powerful and lasting change comes from the inside out. It starts with identity. Here is a concrete example. 2 people are both trying to quit smoking. Someone offers each of them a cigarette. The first person says, "I am trying to quit." The second person says, "No thanks, I am not a smoker." Do you see the difference? The first person still sees themselves as a smoker who is fighting a battle. The second person has already changed how they see themselves. The behavior flows naturally from the identity. Every action you take is essentially a vote for the type of person you want to become. And over time, those votes accumulate into evidence that shapes how you see yourself. When you go for a run, you cast a vote for being a runner. When you write a page, you cast a vote for being a writer. When you choose the salad, you cast a vote for being someone who takes health seriously. None of these individual votes are decisive on their own, but the pattern of votes over time builds an identity, and that identity then makes the habits feel natural rather than forced. So how do you actually build these habits? This is where Clear introduces what he calls the 4 laws of behavior change. These 4 laws are based on a behavioral framework called the habit loop, which consists of a cue, a craving, a response, and a reward. Understanding and manipulating these 4 elements is how you design habits that stick. Let us go through each one in detail. The first law is make it obvious. This law works on the cue stage of the habit loop. The most important thing to understand here is that a huge portion of our behavior is automatic and unconscious. We respond to cues in our environment without even being fully aware we are doing it. So the first step to changing your habits is to actually become aware of them. Clear suggests doing what he calls a habits scorecard. You literally write down everything you do throughout a typical day, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. And then you evaluate each habit without judgment, marking it as positive, negative, or neutral. The purpose is not to shame yourself or pat yourself on the back. It is simply to bring your automatic behaviors into conscious awareness. You cannot change what you cannot see. Once you have that awareness, you can start designing your environment to make good habits obvious and bad habits invisible. This is one of the most powerful practical takeaways in the entire book. Humans are incredibly responsive to their environment. If a bowl of fruit is on your kitchen counter, you will eat more fruit. If your running shoes are right by the door, you are more likely to go for a run. If your book is on your pillow instead of on a shelf in another room, you are more likely to read before bed. You are not relying on motivation or willpower. You are engineering your surroundings so that the cues for good behavior are constantly in front of you. Clear also introduces a concept called implementation intentions for making habits stick. Instead of saying something vague like, "I am going to exercise more," you make a specific plan that includes when and where. The formula is, "I will do this specific behavior at this specific time in this specific location." This kind of specificity dramatically increases the likelihood that you actually follow through. There is also a related concept called habit stacking, where you link a new habit to an existing one. The formula here is, after I do this current habit, I will do this new habit. For example, after I pour my morning coffee, I will read for 10 minutes. Your existing habits become the triggers for your new ones. The second law is make it attractive. This one operates on the craving phase of the habit loop. Here is the key insight. We do not actually crave the habit itself. We crave the feeling that the habit produces. We do not want to exercise. We want the feeling of energy and confidence. We do not want to read. We want the feeling of being knowledgeable and engaged. We do not want to meditate. We want the feeling of calm and clarity. Understanding this distinction is powerful because it means you can engineer ways to make habits more appealing by attaching them to anticipated rewards. Clear talks about dopamine here in a way that completely shifts your understanding of motivation. Dopamine is often called the pleasure chemical, but that is actually a bit misleading. Dopamine spikes not just when we experience a reward, but also when we anticipate one. The anticipation is often even more powerful than the actual reward. This is why you feel a rush of excitement when you think about going on vacation before the vacation even starts. And it is also why habits become so powerful once they are established, because the brain starts releasing dopamine just in anticipation of the reward, which pulls you toward the behavior before you have even consciously decided to do it. One practical technique for making habits attractive is what Clear calls temptation bundling. This is where you pair something you need to do with something you genuinely enjoy. For example, you only allow yourself to watch your favorite show while you are on the treadmill, or you only listen to your favorite podcast while you are doing your weekly chores. The habit you need to do gets associated with the reward you enjoy, making it far more appealing. Clear also discusses the extraordinary power of social influence on our habits. We are deeply social creatures, and we naturally absorb the norms and behaviors of the groups we belong to. This means one of the most powerful things you can do to build a new habit is to surround yourself with people for whom that behavior is already normal. If you want to become a reader, hang out with readers. If you want to get fit, join a fitness community. The social pressure and the cultural norms of your group will do much of the heavy lifting for you without you even having to try that hard. The third law is make it easy, and this might be the most underrated of the four. It deals with the response phase, the actual behavior itself. The core principle here is what Clear calls the law of least effort. Human beings by nature gravitate toward the path of least resistance. We conserve energy wherever we can. This is not a character flaw. It is evolution doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is that our modern environment is engineered to exploit this tendency in ways that do not serve us. Junk food is easier to access than healthy food. Social media is easier than reading a book. Watching TV is easier than exercising. So the key is to flip the script. You make your good habits easier and your bad habits harder. Clear calls this reducing friction for good habits and increasing friction for bad ones. Want to practice guitar more? Leave the guitar out on its stand in the middle of the room instead of in the case in the closet. Want to eat healthier? Prep your vegetables and healthy snacks at the beginning of the week so they are just as easy to grab as a bag of chips. Want to stop mindlessly scrolling your phone? Delete the most tempting apps and make them annoying to reinstall. Every extra step between you and a bad habit is a moment where you might reconsider. Clear also introduces what he calls the 2-minute rule, and this is absolutely brilliant in its simplicity. When you are trying to start a new habit, scale it down to something that takes 2 minutes or less. Want to start meditating? Meditate for 2 minutes. Want to start running? Just put on your running shoes. Want to start reading? Read 1 page. The idea is that the most important thing is showing up consistently, because every time you show up, you are reinforcing the identity of someone who does that thing. And once you are in the habit of showing up, extending the duration and intensity becomes much easier over time. The hardest part is always starting, and the 2-minute rule removes that barrier almost completely. The fourth and final law is make it satisfying. This deals with the reward phase of the habit loop, and it is rooted in a fundamental truth about how our brains learn. We repeat what feels good. We avoid what feels bad. This is basic conditioning, and it is incredibly powerful. The problem is that most good habits have delayed rewards. You do not feel healthier immediately after one healthy meal. You do not see your savings account grow meaningfully after putting away $20. The benefits are real, but they are in the future. And bad habits tend to have immediate rewards, but delayed costs. The cigarette feels good right now, even though it is harming you in ways you will not experience until years from now. This mismatch between immediate and delayed returns is the fundamental challenge of building good habits and breaking bad ones. Clear says the solution is to add some form of immediate satisfaction to your good habits and some form of immediate cost to your bad ones. One practical way to do this is visual progress tracking. Clear talks about a technique where you keep a jar of paper clips on your desk. Every time you complete a focused work session, you move one paper clip from one jar to another. Watching that second jar fill up gives you a tangible, immediate sense of progress that is deeply satisfying. The same principle applies to habit trackers, whether that is a simple calendar where you mark off each day you completed your habit or a dedicated app. Clear also talks about never missing twice. This is a crucial concept for resilience. Everyone misses a day eventually. Life happens. You get sick, you travel, unexpected things come up. The mistake most people make is treating one missed day as evidence that they have failed, and then giving up entirely. Clear says the real danger is not missing once. It is missing twice in a row. One missed day is an accident. 2 missed days is the beginning of a new habit. So when you miss, your only job is to get back on track as quickly as possible. Missing once never ruined anyone. Missing twice and then 3 times and then a week is where habits fall apart. For breaking bad habits, you essentially reverse all 4 laws. Make it invisible instead of obvious. Remove the cues from your environment that trigger the bad habit. Move the junk food out of your kitchen entirely. Delete the social media apps from your phone. If you cannot see it, you are less likely to be triggered by it. Make it unattractive instead of attractive. Actively reprogram how you think about the bad habit. Instead of focusing on what you think you are gaining from it, focus on what it is actually costing you. Really get honest about the ways the habit is harming your health, your relationships, your finances, your self-respect. Make it difficult instead of easy. Add friction. Make it genuinely inconvenient to engage in the bad behavior. Put barriers between yourself and the cue. And make it unsatisfying instead of satisfying. Clear even talks about something called a habit contract, where you create a written agreement with yourself, or even better with a trusted friend or partner, that specifies what your habit will be and what the consequence will be if you fail to follow through. Having someone else hold you accountable adds a layer of social consequence that makes breaking the habit feel costly in a very immediate way. Now let us talk about some of the more advanced concepts in the book, because there is a lot more depth here than just the 4 laws. One of the most thought-provoking ideas is what Clear calls the Goldilocks rule. This is about finding the right level of challenge in your habits and activities. Here is what happens at the extremes. If a task is too easy, you get bored and your motivation fades. If a task is too hard, you get overwhelmed and anxious and you also lose motivation. But right in the middle, where a task is just hard enough to challenge you, but not so hard that it feels impossible, that is where you find what psychologists call flow. That state of deep focus and engagement where you are completely absorbed in what you are doing. The key to maintaining motivation over the long term is to keep nudging your habits and goals slightly beyond your current comfort zone. Not so far that you break, just far enough to keep things interesting and to keep you growing. Clear also talks about the relationship between habits and identity in the context of mastery and expertise. As you practice something over and over, it gradually becomes automatic. At first, driving a car requires intense conscious concentration. You are thinking about every little thing. But after years of driving, most of it happens without any conscious effort at all. This automaticity is what allows you to do more with less mental energy. And it is why building habits is so powerful. Once the good behavior becomes automatic, you free up mental bandwidth to focus on other things. But here is the flip side that Clear is honest about. When behaviors become too automatic, they can also become mindless. You can fall into a rut where you are performing the habit, but you have stopped learning and growing from it. The solution is periodic reflection. Clear recommends doing a kind of annual or semi-annual review of your habits and your life. Looking honestly at what is working, what is not, where you have grown, and where you have stagnated. This kind of intentional self-reflection prevents your habits from becoming a cage rather than a ladder. There is also a fascinating section in the book about the role of genetics and natural talent. Clear does not shy away from this because it is real and it matters. The truth is that your genes do influence what you are naturally good at and what you genuinely enjoy. Different people have different default strengths and different default temperaments, and the smartest approach to habits and self-improvement is to lean into your natural strengths rather than constantly fighting against your nature. If you hate running but you love dancing, guess what counts as cardio? If you find traditional meditation unbearable but you love long solo walks, guess what functions as a mindfulness practice? The specific form of your habits matters less than the outcome they produce, and the habits you will actually stick to are the ones that align with who you naturally are. Clear also discusses something he calls the downside of good habits. Once a habit becomes automatic, you tend to stop paying close attention to it. A professional athlete who has been practicing their sport for years still needs to actively work on their form, because even tiny errors in technique, if practiced repeatedly, become deeply ingrained. The same is true in any domain. The solution is to combine habitual practice with deliberate attention to quality. Show up automatically, but keep reviewing and adjusting rather than just going through the motions. Let me also expand on something Clear touches on regarding the environment as an invisible architect of your behavior. This concept goes deeper than just leaving your running shoes by the door. Every single environment you spend time in is continuously shaping your habits and your decisions, often in ways you are completely unaware of. The layout of your office influences how productive you are. The organization of your kitchen influences what you eat. The apps on your phone influence how you spend your time. The people in your social circle influence your ambitions and your values. Understanding this means you can take deliberate control over your environment rather than just being passively shaped by it. You become the designer of the context that produces your behavior, and that is an enormously empowering reframe. Clear also makes a distinction that a lot of people miss, which is the difference between being in motion and taking action. Being in motion means planning, strategizing, researching, thinking about what you are going to do. Taking action means actually doing the thing. Motion feels productive because it is activity, but if it never converts into action, it produces nothing. This is another form of procrastination, just a more sophisticated version. And the cure is to schedule your habit so specifically that there is no decision to be made. You do not decide each morning whether to exercise. You have already decided. The system makes it automatic, so you never have to negotiate with yourself. Something else worth highlighting is Clear's discussion of measurement and tracking. He notes that we tend to manage what we measure. When you track a habit, you make it visible and concrete. You create a record that you can look back on, that shows you your progress, that reminds you of your commitment. This is deeply satisfying and motivating. But Clear also adds an important caveat here, which comes from a principle in economics sometimes called Goodhart's Law. When a measure becomes the goal itself, it ceases to be a good measure. In plain language, if you are so focused on hitting your habit streak that you start doing the minimum possible just to check the box, you have missed the point. The goal was never to move the paperclip. The goal was to do the work. The tracking is a tool, not the destination. One more thing worth unpacking here is the concept of identity reinforcement through small wins. Every time you complete your habit, even in its smallest possible form, you are doing something psychologically profound. You are proving to yourself that you are the kind of person who does this. And over time, that accumulated evidence reshapes your self-concept. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who is trying to change, and you start thinking of yourself as someone who has changed. That shift is enormous because it removes the internal resistance. You are no longer fighting against your identity. Your habits and your identity are now aligned, and that alignment is what makes change feel effortless rather than exhausting. The core message of Atomic Habits, when you strip away everything else, is this: you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Your life right now is the product of the habits you have built, consciously or not. And the good news, the really remarkable news, is that you can redesign those systems starting with the very next decision you make. You do not need a perfect plan. You do not need ideal circumstances. You do not need to wait until Monday or January or until you finally feel ready. You just need to take one small step in the right direction, and then another one tomorrow, and then one more the day after that. The math does the rest. 1% better every day. 365 days, 37 times better by the end of the year. That is not motivation speaking. That is just how compound growth works, and it works exactly the same way in your life as it does in your bank account. The investments you make today, even the tiny ones, will pay returns that will astonish you if you just have the patience and the consistency to let them compound. So here is what I want you to do right now, before this video ends, and before the world rushes back in and you forget. Think of one habit, just one, that you want to build. Then apply the 4 laws to it right now in your mind. How can you make it obvious by placing a cue where you will see it? How can you make it attractive by pairing it with something you enjoy? How can you make it easy by scaling it down to just 2 minutes? And how can you make it satisfying by giving yourself some immediate acknowledgement or reward when you complete it? You do not need to overhaul your entire life today. You just need to design one good system for one good habit. Do that, and you have already started becoming the person you actually want to be. If this breakdown gave you value, please hit that like button right now, because it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who could use these ideas. And if you want more deep dives into books and frameworks that will actually change how you think and how you live, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you do not miss what is coming next. The next video is going to be something you definitely do not want to sleep on. I will see you there.